Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a big show. March Madness is continuing. It is underway. We have had some overtime games, some crazy upsets. Kentucky is out of the tournament, losing to 14 seed Oakland behind a 10 three-pointer, 10 made three-pointers by Oakland's star player. We're going to break down all of that, what it means for the rest of the tournament, what it means for the future of Kentucky, as well as upcoming matchups in the second round, some interesting games that are coming up, and what has already been going on today, as well as live updates throughout the entire tournament. We're also going to talk a little bit about the NFL draft at the end. J.J. McCarthy, big hot button issue. A lot of teams are trying to trade up for him. Broncos and Raiders love him. Vikings are rumored to trade up for him. We'll talk a little bit about all of that coming up at the end. But before we get into anything, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. If you leave a message, it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen. We appreciate anything that you do give. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate all of your everything you bring to the show. But like I was saying, we're going to start this show off with Kentucky. Kentucky is officially out of the March Madness bracket for the second time in as many years as I can remember. A couple years ago, or 2 years ago, they lost in the first round to St. Peter's when they were the 2 seed, lost to the 15 seed St. Peter's when they were going on that run, and this year they lose to Oakland. Kentucky has a problem, honestly. Kentucky has had this trend. John Calipari, who's a legendary coach, won a couple national titles. He's on the hot seat. It's an interesting position for Kentucky, and we talked a little bit about it. A couple days ago with Virginia, how I would put their coach Tony Bennett on the hot seat, but Kentucky is not quite as far down as Virginia. No, they still made a 3 seed as the tournament, and they got hung on 30 piece on by Jack Golke hitting 10 three-pointers. Only 5 other players have ever done that in the history of D1, of the tournament. Those were the only shots he made. He doesn't shoot twos. I believe he had shot like a grand total of 5 non-3-point shots the entire season. So that's what he does. He just jacks up threes. But Kentucky could never put away Oakland. Oakland had hot shooting. They were shooting 48% from 3. And when you shoot 48% from 3, that's a recipe for success. But we're looking at a team in Kentucky that has a lot of talent. They were a 3 seed in the tournament. They were in a tough conference. They were really successful. And then this happens. This has been happening a lot recently for them. Their last couple tournament results have not been very, very good. It's been kind of a mess in the land of Kentucky. I think John Calipari should be on the hot seat next season. Now, he's going to have a good season. Kentucky's a very talented team. They're a blue blood. They're a blue blood for a reason. But as times start to change in college basketball, he needs to evolve with it. It's not easy to do. We see regimes rise and fall all the time. We see it happen in every sport, at every level. And Kentucky is not immune to that. I don't think this is the end of Kentucky. Kentucky's going to have another very talented team next season. They're going to have plenty, and when I say plenty, I mean plenty of star players on their roster. They always do, because they're really good at recruiting. And that's something that's kept them at the top for so long. Name brand helps with that, of course. But you start to think about these tournament losses, these brutal tournament losses, it's becoming a trend for them. It's a little concerning, and I think the leash for John Calipari is particularly long because he's a legendary coach. He's part of that big the big five of coaches, I guess you would say, for this era. You know, uh, Mike Krzyzewski, obviously with Duke, the Bill Self, Bill Self. You have a UNC coach, and then Tom Izzo in there as well. Those guys have been super successful. Um, so he's got a very long leash, and I don't think he's going to get fired anytime soon. But I think it's fair to have that conversation. Uh, the same thing with Tony Bennett at Virginia. He's a very good coach. He won a championship back in 2019, but that was 5 years ago at this point. Like at some point, for a team with expectation like Kentucky has, you need to meet those expectations. You need to be able to go out there, and you need to be able to uh, hold those expectations up. Have these have these kids go out there and play good, play well, uh, and you need to prepare them for that. I don't know if it's the coaching. I've seen a bunch of people saying he coasts on talent, and he doesn't have that Anthony Davis, that John Wall talent anymore. He doesn't have those elite number one overall pick guys. He's got some guys that are better than a lot of the other people in NCAA Division One, but they weren't really playing together as a team, and that's my biggest takeaway from that game. It was a lot of hero ball, and I know sometimes when the moment gets big and you're losing and it's not going your way, when you have stars, they want to play hero ball, but that's not good coaching. That leads to the fall of teams, and I'm sure this isn't what's been happening for the other seasons, but this is something I particularly noticed with Kentucky against, with Kentucky against Oakland yesterday. They were playing a lot of hero ball. They weren't passing. They were jacking up awful shots. It just wasn't Kentucky basketball. It was It was iso ball, and iso ball is not how you win games in college. Not a big fan of how that went. But Kentucky is out, so very curious to see the aftermath of that. I think the seat starts to simmer a little bit under Kentucky's coach there. So keep an eye on that. Like I said, I don't think he's on the hot seat yet, but if he does this a couple more times, like two more, if he does it next season again, where they're a top 4 seed and they lose in the first round, or if he does it one more time in the next 2 years without making a big run, I think you can officially put him on the hot seat. It's not a good look for a school that has a proud basketball tradition. So we'll see if they can turn it around. Coming up, we're in our next segment. We are going to go over all the games that happened today and yesterday that we missed when our show ended. Talk about some of the crazy endings that happened over the night. So stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking about Kentucky's collapse, what that means for the future of John Calipari, as well as the future of Kentucky and the whole landscape of college basketball as a whole. In this segment, we are going to talk about some of the games of yesterday and the ones that are happening live right now, and the ones that went final before our show. But before we do, if you have anything to say to contribute to the show, leave a comment. I'm reading all of those. And also, if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. With a message, it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a discussion about what you had to say. Appreciate everyone that does leave a tip or donation, as well as leaving a comment. Anyway, once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Like I was saying, we're going to talk about live March Madness. So everything that is going on right now, today, as well as what happened yesterday. So we're going to start with the games that are live. Right now, currently, there are 4 games that are live. New Mexico versus Clemson is wrapping up. The darling New Mexico Lobos, the team that a lot of people had going really far. I saw some people taking them all the way to the Final Four. They are getting destroyed right now. They are down by 20 points, 19 points. It's 71-52. 3 minutes to go in that game. That is going to be a surprising bracket buster for a lot of people. I know a lot of people had New Mexico going very far. It just wasn't their game. New Mexico did not make a lot of shots. Clemson just out-physicaled them down low. In the beginning, they were close, but Clemson kind of pulled away when New Mexico went on a short, cold streak in the beginning of the game. So, excuse me. New Mexico is out. It's going to bust a lot of brackets. A lot more than an 11 seed probably should. But New Mexico out. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, there's still time to go in that game, but when you're shooting, 14% from 3 for a team that is a very good three-point shooting team, that's not the recipe to win games. So they are down by 21 now at this point. This game is just about over. The other games that are live, also not that close. UConn absolutely dominating Stetson. They are up by 38 points now. They are going to win by 40, most likely. There's a minute left in this game. UConn dominant, as they've always been. Stetson wasn't really ever going to give them too much trouble. They're just flat out the better team in this game. Stetson did not quite match up. The 2 games that are close, though, that are live right now, they have 3 minutes and 2 minutes, respectively, left in the first half as they go into halftime. Auburn taking on Yale. Auburn is up by 7 with 3 minutes to go in that first half. It is 29-36, I say, as Yale just made a 3 to make it a 4-point game. Yale is playing a very strong game, shooting 44% from 3. The part that's killing them is their turnovers. They have 7 turnovers to Auburn's 4, and points off turnovers, Auburn has 7, and Yale has 0. So that's really the big difference right there. Turnovers is a huge, huge difference in this game. They're shooting well, but they're giving away too many possessions. We'll see how that ends. We are heading into halftime. And the other game that's still live and heading into halftime right now is Colorado taking on Florida. Colorado, the play-in team that absolutely that beat Boise State for the right to play Florida. They're currently up by 2 points. It's 39-37, 2.5 to go in the first. Florida was winning this game for quite some time. In a game where both of these teams are perfect from the line. Colorado has just taken 6 more free throws. Florida is out-rebounding them. They're more physical on the glass, and that's a big difference to watch as we head later into this game, especially if it stays close. They have 5 offensive rebounds to 0, so they're not getting those second chance points, but they are, giving themselves opportunities to get those second chance points. Colorado just has more free throws. Talk about fouls. You need to play a clean game. That's just as important as anything else. And Florida has not played a clean game. They've got 8 fouls to 5. They did have the biggest lead. They did have a big lead heading into it. though. Colorado has just coming off a nice little run. I believe it was like a an 8-2 run, gave them a lead. But some to keep out since Florida has a slight edge on the board, especially offensive rebounds. This game is going to be back and forth as it heads into halftime. A 1-point game, 2 minutes to go. I think Colorado's going to pull this out, but anything can happen. As for the other games that have come and gone today, there were a couple really tight ones, surprisingly, unsurprisingly to some. Northwestern FAU went to overtime. Northwestern takes it out in overtime. They absolutely dominated that overtime period, 77-65. They outscored them in that overtime period, 19-7. So, it was FAU was winning was dominating that first half. Northwestern came in out of halftime and kind of took control of that game. There were moments FAU had a chance to win the game in regulation after Northwestern had tied it. They held it at the top and just jacked up a three. It wasn't the best shot, wasn't the best decision, but there were only a couple seconds left. They weren't going to get a much better shot. But no, this was a really, really good game. It's a really fun game to watch. You had a really nice battle between Ryan Langborg and FAU, Johnny Davis. Both of those guys went off. They had great games. Free throw shooting really kept FAU in it. They're not a great free throw shooting team, but they shot the ball really well from the line. Shot 16 of 21, which is a lot better than their season averages. But in the end, Northwestern pulled it out in overtime. For the rest of the games today, there's a couple good ones. We've talked about all of this as well before. Keep an eye out. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. We thought for a second there, at least I did when I was watching, that Western Kentucky was going to pull off a massive update against Marquette. Marquette goes on a run down the stretch. They were up by like as much as 10 in that first half. Western Kentucky was, and they just kind of ran out of steam. Marquette came all the way back, and then they went on like a 17. It was a 7-point game with about 5 minutes left, and then it became a 20-point game. So it's just tough when you have a team like Marquette that absolutely goes off. They score 51 in the second half. Tyrone Marshall for Western Kentucky had an incredible game. He more than doubled his season averages in points. He looked really solid against a really tough Marquette team. Western Kentucky hung in as much as they could, but at the end of the day, Marquette was just too much for them, and they weren't able to hold on. The other game that went final today, Baylor just dominated throughout over Colgate. It was never close. Baylor was up the entire time, and they were up big. And there was one more close game. San Diego State taking on UAB. San Diego State on some hero ball by Jaden Ledee, putting up 32 points, dominating the inside at the end of the game. They just did not have an answer for him. UAB did. He single-handedly won that game for them. He scored almost half of the team's points. Incredible performance from him. A team that made the national championships last season. They need a lot to go right to make it there again. UAB was going to be a tough out. If you were watching yesterday, we talked about how these two teams are almost identically built stats-wise. So no surprise this was a close game. But San Diego State takes it home. Very entertaining, very fun to watch. But yeah, as for this weekend's matchups, not all of them are set, but a couple of them are. We'll just talk about Saturdays because most of Saturday's games are set. Actually, all of Saturday's games are set. One game that really sticks out to me, Gonzaga versus Kansas. Gonzaga took out another Cinderella sweetheart in McNeese State yesterday. They took out another Cinderella favorite in McNeese State yesterday very handily. And they're moving on to play Kansas, who barely scraped by against Samford. That's a controversial one. We'll get into that in our next segment, actually. But those two are going to play. Actually, we'll get into that now. We'll get into the weekend games in our next segment. But Samford almost took down Kansas yesterday. Samford was in it the whole time. They were down by 2 down the stretch. There was a breakaway, and then a block on a dunk by Samford was called a foul. If you go back and you watch that play, it was very clearly a block. There was no contact at all. And they have these replays, right? They have the ability to go back and replay in college basketball. They just only do it for out-of-bounds calls. You'd think that they would review something like that and overturn it, because maybe not on first glance, because the Kansas player took a tumble. He tried to catch himself on the rim, and he just did not catch himself on the rim. He landed hard on the floor, and that's why the foul was called. I completely understand that. But the fact that they have replay opportunities and they let it slide, they let it go, they let this hugely important call that probably changed the entire face of the game. Instead of Samford getting the ball back down 1 possession, Kansas gets 2 free throws to extend it to 2. It's really unfortunate how that happens. There's there's plenty of officiating flubs every single season, all the time. But the fact that they have replay and they're not using it really kind of bothers me. Like, what's the point of having replay if you're just going to sit there and be like, nah, we're good. We're just not going to do it. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to go over some of the weekend games. Saturday slate is all set. We're going to run through those, as well as talking a little bit about the Sunday games that are set, as well as keeping an eye on the games that are going final right now. Stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you were just tuning in, we talked about Kentucky and their meltdown, the big upset so far of the tournament, Oakland taking down Kentucky. We talked about that, what that means for the future of Kentucky and the rest of the tournament. We just went over some of the live games that are going on. Before we get into this segment, just a couple updates for you. 2 games have gone final. Clemson just beat New Mexico 77-56. UConn took down Stetson 91-52. At the half in Yale and Auburn, it's 41-34. Auburn up by 7. And also at half, Colorado and Florida are deadlocked in a tie, 45-45. In this segment, we're going to preview a little bit of the weekend games, the games that we do know are going to happen, as well as trying to find the best matchups, see what these Sweet 16 teams might look like. Looking at the Saturday games. But before we get into that, remember, if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. We appreciate anything that you do give. If you leave a message with it, it'll pop up on the screen for you, me, anyone around the rest of the world to see. We have people from Japan watching these shows, so you can have your voice heard halfway around the world. We appreciate anything that you do give. Once again, that link to leave a tip or donation is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we're going to do some preview of Saturday's games. Saturday's games are basically just the winners from Thursday. So we're just going to run through them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games on. I guess that makes sense. 8 games on Saturday. So we're going to take a look at all of them, talk about some of the surprises that got there, as well as what I expect to happen. First game of the day, Dayton taking on Arizona. Dayton, who came back from down 17 late in the game. They went on a 24-2 run to close out that game to squeak by Nevada. Collapse by that team. I can't believe that Dayton advanced. That was probably one of the craziest moments so far of the tournament. Them coming back from that far down is insane to me. But they're all the way back. Now they have another tough test taking on Arizona. Arizona, a team that can score with the best of them. You take a look at this Arizona team. They're a little bit inconsistent, but they have Caleb Love, shoots 41% from the field, 18 points per game. He's really good. Their offense is one of the best in the country. It's very scary to watch. You know, they shoot 36% from 3. The Dayton is probably a better shooting team, but when you get to some of the hustle stats, you know, you take a look at rebounds, where they average 42 a game. Assists, very important number, especially in the tournament, not being stuck in that hero ball like we were talking about with Kentucky. They have 19 assists per game. They average 8 steals. That defense, that perimeter defense especially, is really good. So yeah, this is going to be a really tough test for Dayton and the Flyers. I do believe that Arizona is going to pull this one out, although if Dayton gets hot, they do shoot almost 40% from 3. So if they get hot, they're a tough team to beat. Anyone that can shoot the lights out from 3, we just saw it with Oakland beating Kentucky. They shot the lights out from 3. Golke hit 10 of them in that game. So something to keep an eye out on. A game that I find the most interesting for Saturday is going to be Gonzaga taking on Kansas. Kansas is without their best player, so that makes this a much less intriguing matchup. But you saw what they did against a very tough Samford team. Samford was not a team to be taken lightly, but Kansas held on. They fought through the toughness. They were down a couple guys against a really high energy Samford team that goes like 11 deep. So it's really impressive that they're able to, you know, come back from that injury from probably their best player and still win a tournament game. That is very good coaching. That's great preparation. Gonzaga is going to be tough, though. Gonzaga is a 5 seed for a reason. We know who the Zags are. Mark Few leads a really tight ship up there. They've been really good. They took kind of a step back. They're not a 1 seed like they usually are, but they're still a really good team. You know, they didn't even win their conference, and they were the 5 seed. So, very impressive by them. Gonzaga, if they win this game, this might be their year. You know, they're kind of being slept on a little bit. They play in a bracket, the side of the bracket that is doable. You know, they get Purdue in the Sweet 16 if they win, or presumably they get Purdue in the Sweet 16 if they win. I don't ever want to assume stuff. There's lots of stuff to still figure out, but if everything goes chalk, they'd get Purdue in that Sweet 16, and Purdue has a history of choking, especially against not so good teams. Now, they're better against great teams, but Gonzaga, Kansas, it's not that far. It's the winner of this game probably goes to the Elite Eight, I think, where they'll run into Tennessee or Creighton most likely. Anything can happen, though. It's really tough. Like I was saying, it's really tough to project outward in this tournament because it's March Madness. It's March Madness for a reason. But I think Gonzaga is going to win that game coming up on Saturday. North Carolina versus Michigan State. Michigan State played incredible. They really did. They shut down Mississippi State. Mississippi State couldn't make a shot. They got out. They've out physicaled them. Their athleticism was really impressive. I think I saw like 10 dunks. They were really trying to alley-oop on Mississippi State. They kept missing, but every time I looked up, they were tossing another alley-oop. I saw them dunk over someone. They're a very athletic team. They're very big. They're very physical. It's going to be a good matchup. I slept on this Spartans team because I've seen them struggle. I've seen them struggle shooting, and when they struggle shooting, they're not very good. But if they can shoot like they did against Mississippi State, they can make a lot of noise in this tournament. I'm not too convinced on the Tar Heels. Now that I say that, they're probably going to win the tournament, but the Tar Heels, I think, are the weakest one seed, and that's how they were seeded. So this could be a tough matchup. I think the Tar Heels are still going to pull this one out. I just think the Spartans, Michigan State, are way too inconsistent to really make that deep of a run. But I wouldn't be too shocked if they did it. I'm taking the Tar Heels, though, in this one. Washington State against Iowa State. And this one is going to be fun, guys. I love me defensive battles. And this is a defensive battle. Iowa State, by a lot of metrics, either has the best or the second best defense in the entire nation. Washington State is no slouch on defense. I believe they're top 20. These two teams are very similar. Similar field goal, three-point shooting, free throw percentage, rebounds. The Cougars have a slight edge, but assists, the Cyclones have a slight edge, so it kind of evens it out. I am taking the Cyclones in it because I think their defense is just too much. You talk about perimeter defense, the way that their defenses are good differ. The Iowa State Cyclones, they have great perimeter defense. They're averaging 10.4 steals a game, and where the Cougars are really good with Washington State, they're really good on interior defense. 4.8 blocks a game, almost 5 blocks a game. That's very tough. So Iowa State, what they're good at, as far as offensively, both of these teams are very similar offensively. They both shoot 34 from 3, 46 from the field. So Iowa State, I think, is going to take this just because their perimeter defense is so much better. The Cougars have a lot of guards out there that, I think they can take advantage of. But this is going to be a really fun game. This is going to be a tight one. Low-scoring defensive matchup for the right to make it to the Sweet 16. So that'll be a lot of fun. Another really fun game coming up right after that. Oakland at NC State. We just finished talking about Oakland. Mr. Golke there, 10 threes. NC State is on a heater. They've run their way through the ACC. They are now playing in the second round in the NCAA tournament. They're on a 6-game win streak. And I like both of these teams a lot. They're both streaky, you could say. And this is another game where they're really, really similar. They're so similar. They both shoot 34% from 3. They both shoot 44% from the field. Their free throw percentage differs by less than 1%. Rebounds are the same. Assists are a little bit in favor of Oakland, but steals, again, in the defense is a little bit in favor of the Wolfpack. And when it comes down to this, when their offense is so similar, like these two teams are, again, I always side with the defense. The defense over here for the Wolfpack is probably going to push them ahead, but this is fun. An 11-14 matchup. We don't see that too often. So these are always fun to watch. Scrappy basketball. Both of these teams are playing with all the momentum in the world. NC State especially. They are on a heater like I have rarely seen. And then that's how NC State has been all season. They've been kind of hot and then they fall off a cliff. So hopefully they can stay consistent. That way this doesn't have to happen again where they disappoint. But they are in the postseason. They're fighting for fighting in the round of 32. So this is a successful season for a Wolfpack team that was not even projected to make the tourney. They were a 10 seed in the ACC, for God's sake, and now they won a game in the tourney. So Tennessee is very interesting. I think Tennessee should dominate. They have one of the better players. They shoot really well, and their defense is there. Their defense is always there. They don't turn the ball over quite as much. But Texas is good too. Don't sleep on the Longhorns. I just think Tennessee, again, these second round matchups are really solid. If you look at just the bare numbers, all of these teams are very similar. Every single one of them, at least on Saturday's games. But Tennessee just has the better player. It's really what it comes down to. They have a lottery player in Connect. So I'm taking them in this game. They're also my Final Four pick. And then there's two 11-3 matchups. We've had 3 11 seeds advance. It'd be crazy. I don't know the last time that all 4 11 seeds advanced, if that's even still possible. It's not. New Mexico lost. I forgot about that. But 3 out of 4 11 seeds advanced. 12 seeds are not faring quite as well. There's only been 2 12 seeds, but they're 0-2. The 12 seeds and the 11 seeds this year were pretty strong. Oregon takes on Creighton. I just think Creighton's a great team. They could win the national championship, and I wouldn't be that surprised. And then the other 11 seed, the Duquesne Dukes taking on Illinois, who Big Ten champion. They kind of started off a little slow, but they have juice. I don't expect either of these 11 seeds to make it. If any of them are, I think it might be Duquesne. I think Duquesne just has a better matchup. Oregon is probably a better team than Duquesne if they were to play head-to-head, but Creighton just is too much for the Ducks in Oregon, I think. So that's what we're looking like on Saturday. As far as the rest of the games for the weekend that are set, Clemson and Baylor, I think Baylor is going to dog walk them. I know Clemson just put up a nice showing against New Mexico, but Baylor just looks so dominant. I know it wasn't quite the same team, Colgate versus New Mexico, but that team's going to be really good. But yeah, that's every game that's been. And last one. There's one more that's been set. UConn taking on Northwestern. I don't really think I need to put too much analysis into this. UConn is just a juggernaut. You saw what they just did to poor Stetson there on the 16 seed line. And Northwestern is good, but they're not UConn good. So, anyway, thank you everybody for sticking around through this March Madness preview. We will, in our next segment, transition out of basketball into football. Talk a little bit about J.J. McCarthy, because teams love him. 3 teams are rumored to try and trade up for him. And the packages that they're offering, as a Giants fan, I really hope they take, because rumors are Giants are also interested in taking J.J. McCarthy, and my thoughts are known. I dislike J.J. McCarthy a lot. I think he's not an NFL quarterback, so I think it's a waste of a pick. But a lot of teams are into him, so it's a sweepstakes, and this could get really interesting. A lot of these teams have a lot of assets. But anyway, we're going to talk about all that and more coming up in our 4th and final segment. Thank you for sticking around. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you were just tuning in, we've done a lot of March Madness. March Madness is the big talk of the day. We previewed some games for the weekend. We talked about all the big stories that happened yesterday and today. Overtime game, John Calipari and Kentucky getting knocked out in the first round yet again by Oakland this time. But in this segment, we're going to transition into football. Talk about a little bit more draft stuff that's going on. So, like I was talking about in our intro here, J.J. McCarthy has been getting a lot of buzz. J.J. McCarthy on my board is like the 5th or 6th best quarterback. I don't think he's up there, but there are 3 teams that are rumored to try and trade up for him: the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders. So we'll talk about all that, the packages that those guys could offer, where they're trying to trade up to, and more. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. If you leave a message, it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there for you, me, and everybody else to see. We'll have a discussion about what you had to say, and we appreciate everything you do give. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Also, if you have any thoughts on what we are talking about, feel free to leave a comment as well. I'm keeping an eye on those. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on any of this. But like I was saying, J.J. McCarthy is a hot-button name in sports nowadays, especially this draft. He's coming off a national championship season with the Michigan Wolverines. Now he's getting on top 5, top 10 buzz, which I think is insane. No matter what people say, it's not going to change my mind. People start off with he's a winner. He doesn't have any trait that's special to me. So I don't understand why people think he's all that. But that's besides the point. There are 4 teams that I've heard in contention for J.J. McCarthy, I guess is the word. The Giants, who sit there at 6, which doesn't seem like a team that's going to take him. They just signed Drew Lock to a 1-year deal, and J.J. McCarthy having a third Daniel Jones in that system, it just isn't going to be it. You've already got Drew Lock, you've already got Daniel Jones, and now you have 3 of the exact same players if they draft him. That's not going to be it. The Vikings, the Raiders, and the Broncos, though. The Broncos don't have a quarterback. The Raiders half have a quarterback. They got a quarterback battle with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, I guess. And the Vikings, who have Sam Darnold. So they also only half have a quarterback. So the Vikings have 2 first-round picks in this draft, and the compensation starts there, trading up to 5 for J.J. McCarthy, trading up to 6, which is where I've been seeing it. 2 first-rounders is kind of the baseline from what I've been seeing. So that's a lot of value for a team like the Giants that needs a lot of help everywhere. You know, you might not get that top-tier wide receiver at 6 that you were going to get, but you also are going to get an extra draft pick. And for a team like the Giants, that'd be so useful. They need one, especially when you are giving up, presumably, for J.J. McCarthy to not be very good in his first year or ever in the NFL. The Packers, if he makes it to... So it's 11, 12, 13 that is trying to draft J.J. McCarthy right now. So you'd have to trade into the top 10 to get him. You'd have to leapfrog people unless you're Minnesota. And Minnesota probably doesn't feel very safe at 11 because these guys can leapfrog. But it's a very interesting situation because these teams don't quite have all the assets to give away to go get. And again, I just don't understand all the hype around J.J. McCarthy. Excuse me, I forgot to put the title up. I just really don't understand the hype behind him. He won games, sure. So did Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett won games. He's not even in the league anymore. I think that J.J. McCarthy is very much comparable to a player like Daniel Jones, to a player like, Drew Lock. Those 2 guys are just, they can start in the NFL, but they're not the answer. You know, you don't want to spend a first-round pick on that. You really don't. So that's my opinion. Obviously, the first-round quarterbacks especially, it's a crapshoot. It's really hard to evaluate talent. But when you're looking at a guy like J.J. McCarthy, who doesn't have any special skills, he just doesn't. Like, he doesn't do anything special. His arm talent isn't anything great. He doesn't process the game super fast. He doesn't have those intangibles either that you can't really measure. He just kind of is mid. And that's why I don't understand the top 10. Like, if people were talking about drafting J.J. McCarthy in the 3rd round, in the 2nd round even, maybe. But if they were talking about him in the 3rd round, sure. Do your thing. Spend a 3rd round pick on him. That I don't mind. But a 1st round pick, especially a top 10 pick, a pick that can be used to get a franchise-changing player, and you go and you get J.J. McCarthy. I hate it. I really do. I don't understand the logic behind it. There's nothing that sticks out. His pro day was earlier today. I was watching it. He was throwing in shorts. He was making all the throws. Of course he was making all the throws. It's a pro day. You know, he's an NFL prospect. He's going to make all the throws. I really don't get it. I really don't. And it kind of is infuriating to me, honestly, a little bit. Because I just don't see what people see. You know, I pride myself on knowing a lot about football, knowing a lot about sports, but I just don't see the hype around him. And I don't understand why everyone is there. Like, I have yet to hear an argument. Someone's like, oh, I just like him, or, oh, he wins. That's not an argument. You can go look at the numbers. He threw for over 300 yards in one game last year. Just one. And Michigan notoriously had a really weak schedule. Now, you can say, oh, it was the scheme. They ran the ball a lot. So? So what? Put up some impressive numbers if you're going to be an NFL... If you're going to be an NFL talent and you're in a run-heavy offense, make those wow throws. You know? Make those plays. He doesn't make those plays. He had a nice one-handed catch on a flea flicker. That's not a quarterback play, though. Move him to wide receiver. See what he does there. I really just don't get the hype. But anyway, the Vikings reportedly can offer 2 first rounds, a first this year and next year, to get to that number 6 spot to draft J.J. McCarthy. And I think, honestly, the Vikings are probably the best fit for him. You know, it's a really, really solid team there. You have Justin Jefferson. You have Jordan Addison over there. You have Aaron Jones now. And if need be, he can sit behind Sam Darnold for a year, who will be a serviceable starter. He's not a guy you want, but in an offense like that, I mean, you saw what Case Keenum did in an elite Vikings offense a couple years ago. He was like, oh, I'm the greatest for a year. There's no reason why Sam Darnold can't do that. And J.J. McCarthy needs to be carried by the talent around him. So if he gets drafted to the Vikings, I think that's by far his best spot. It's a great team. They're a quarterback away. He will do the backup stuff. He will be a backup that doesn't make mistakes, and that's huge. That's big. He's not an NFL starter, though. But he can pretend to be an NFL starter if he goes to the Vikings. If he goes to the Raiders or the Broncos, good luck. I really just don't see it. The Broncos traded away everyone this offseason to get below the cap because of the whole Russell Wilson situation. And the Raiders are just a mess. They have been since they moved to Vegas. They have been since before they moved to Vegas. But it's been so public since they moved to Vegas. They've got Gardner Minshew now. He probably ends up starting, honestly. So those are the spots he can go. The compensation's going to be good, though, if they do end up making this trade, which I think a team will end up making. 2 firsts to move up 5 spots in the draft, to draft what you think to be your franchise quarterback. If it hits, do it. But we saw a very similar situation happen 4 years ago with Justin Fields. The Bears traded up a couple picks to draft him. They gave up 2 firsts, and nothing really came out of it. The Giants didn't turn that into anything super special, but I don't know, that he's gone. These mistakes are made all the time, you know? It's not like it's impossible. It's so hard to evaluate quarterbacks in the NFL. It just really is. But I hate J.J. McCarthy. I don't think he's a good prospect. Not as a person. He's probably a great guy. But I don't think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. Anyway. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Enjoy March Madness. Stuff is going on. Watch James Madison. They're going to go great. Go Dukes. Sweet 16 bound. Keep an eye out. Maybe they win the whole thing. Maybe. But that's just wishful thinking. Very excited for the rest of March Madness. We'll break down the entirety of the first 2 rounds, the big surprises, the big Cinderellas on Monday. I will have a mock draft out on Monday as well with the free agency. I know I've been saying that for a bit, but I will have that out then, as well as any breaking news over the weekend. Probably an update to the Shohei Ohtani story because that is developing. There's a lot to watch. Keep an eye out on sports. It's going wild right now. It's the best time of year. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. We'll be back Monday, same time, same place. Be there. I appreciate everyone tuning in and watching. I'll see you. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.